What's going on, guys? Welcome to another JNY Tech video. This is Jonathan here, going to give you guys a quick lesson about processors. So what is a processor? A processor can be defined in the most basic of terms, the brain of the computer. So any little bit of information that goes through a computer will be processed by this thing, this little square doodad. A good example of what a processor does is when you're typing something on a Word document, when you type, that is input data. And all that data is processed by the processor, hence the name processor. And your Word documents, every letter you type, that letter that shows up is output data, which has been processed by your CPU and or processor. So currently, right now, there are two main manufacturers for processors here in the US. You got AMD and Intel. AMD has their Ryzen series, their Athlon series, your Threadrippers. Intel has your Pentium, your your iCore series, which is like the Core i5, Core i7, etc. So which one that you're going to want to go with really depends on you. So if you're looking for something more bang for your buck, more mid-game or like mid-range gaming, then you're going to probably want to go with an AMD unless you prefer Intel. It's really up to you. Right now, we're going to talk about sockets. So what is a socket? Well, basically, a socket is a processor. To put in the most basic of terms, a socket is where pretty much like the puzzle piece where your CPU goes into when you're building your computer. So that doesn't mean that you can just grab an AMD processor chip and throw it into an Intel board. They each have their own different type of sockets. So for example, currently right now, the mainline socket that I see personally for Intel is your LGA 1151. Now for AMD, you have your AM4 series sockets. And all those sockets do is that they're the interface to which the processor can communicate with all the other parts of your computer. So why is that important? Well, obviously the newer sockets, you're going to get the newer processors that come with it. If you're going for an older processor, well, you're going to want an older socket type and or motherboard. Another thing that always is very daunting to people, even me when I started, was core count. What are cores? Why are they important? Well, basically, a core is a processor. So you got a processor in your processor. So, for example, this is a quad-core processor. Wait, is this a quad-core? Yes, this is a quad-core. So, what a quad-core processor means is that there are 4 processors in one processor. 2 cores, 4 cores, 6 cores, and for the main line, you can even have 8 cores. And then when you start hitting like Threadripper area, you got your 32 cores. We're gonna skip out on that right now because this is mainly gonna be for the new builders. So what's a core? It's your processor. So you got multiple processors in one processor. Now another thing that really gets people are threads. What are threads and why are they important? Well, threads are part of the processors of your processor. So if you got a 4-core processor, well then that means you got 4 processor, and each processor in there, each of those mini cores or each of those cores count as 2 processors, which sounds pretty crazy. Intel and AMD use technologies called hyper-threading, multi-threading, and what that means is that each core acts as 2 logical processors. So if you have a quad core, which is 4 cores, if you have a quad core, then you have 8 logical cores. So it essentially will double the amount of cores that you already have, which is pretty great. So you got more multitasking. That's what a core does. That's why people go for multi-cores, because the more cores you have, the more that your processor can multitask. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. When you're gaming, you're going to want to at least hit 6 cores. 4 cores is still good, but to get the most performance, you're going to want to go with at least a 6-core processor. An 8-core doesn't show a huge amount of difference between a 6 and an 8, but if you want to go, all the way, well, by all means, get an 8-core processor. You got 16 logical threads, or logical processors, so to speak. So those are pretty important in of themselves. Now, another thing that gets people are hertz. The speed of how many instructions a CPU can handle is measured by hertz. And 1 hertz equals 1 cycle per second. So for example, if you have a processor that's running at 4 hertz, which is actually pretty fast, that's 4 billion instructions in a second, which is crazy. So for example, if you have a processor that's running at 2 hertz, that's 2 billion processors per second. Integrated graphics. So what that means is your processor not only processes information, but it'll also process graphic data. And what graphic data is whatever you see on your monitor, that's graphical data. In a game, you're going to want a dedicated graphics card, but otherwise, if you're not planning on gaming, if you just need a desktop to either surf the web or really just watch YouTube videos, then you're not going to need a dedicated graphics card if you want to go for, say, the AMD Athlon series, which has pretty good integrated graphics in it. And you can watch all your YouTube videos you want using one of those. You can watch as long as you're not trying to play a video game on it, you're good. So you can go with one of those. But otherwise, if you're planning on gaming, you're going to want to have a dedicated graphics card. But if that's not your choice, by all means, look for a CPU that is able to handle graphics. Alrighty guys, so that's gonna wrap up our video. So what this video is just the basics to a CPU, as basic as they can be for the new builders who aren't sure what all this jargon means. If I left anything out, be sure to let me know, comment down below, be sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching the video guys. You guys have a good day.